Gettysburg, a film so good they named a battle and a small town in Pennsylvania after it. Hello everyone, and welcome to the series Battle Paintings. My name is Jack, and today we are going to be covering the events of the Battle of Gettysburg and the charge of the 20th Maine at Little Round Top by Mort Künstler. In 1861, the southern states have seceded from the Union. This has triggered a brutal and bloody war. Over the following 2 years, both sides have won major battles and victories, but by the spring of 1863 this has descended into much of a stalemate. But in the beginning of May, the outnumbered Confederate General Lee, has just defeated the much larger Union Army of the Potomac, just south of Washington, at the Battle of Chancellorsville. Despite the victory, the Confederacy is suffering under the Union naval blockade. Lee convinces the Confederate President Jefferson Davis that a successful invasion of the North is their best chance to win the war. The Army of Northern Virginia slips away from Fredericksburg, Virginia, moving northwest into the Shenandoah Valley, using the Blue Ridge Mountains to hide their movement. This has begun the Gettysburg campaign. The first action of this came at the Battle of Brandy Station on the 9th of June. This was the largest cavalry battle ever fought on US soil. While inconclusive or a small tactical victory towards the CSA, it boosted the morale and confidence of the Union cavalry and allowed the Union to know that the Army of Northern Virginia was moving north. While the Confederate Army marched north, the Union Army has kept between them and Washington, D.C. During this time, a few skirmishes have been fought along the way, but by the 1st of July, both armies have descended onto the small town of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. This would be the most important week of the Civil War, and one of the most important and impactful battles fought yet. Day 1, the 1st of July. The battle began northwest of town. What started as a minor skirmish between Confederate infantry and Union cavalry quickly escalated as both sides rushed tens of thousands of reinforcements to the town. Union Cavalry General John Buford recognized the immense value of the high hills to the south of the town. His troopers fought a delaying action, buying crucial time for the main Union infantry to arrive. With the Union lines breaking, and with the Union troops retreating through the town to Cemetery Hill, Confederate General Lee ordered General Ewell to attack if able to. Ewell chose not to attack, but to await more reinforcements. This allowed vital time for the Union Army to reinforce and entrench on the raised terrain. By the second day of the battle, July 2nd, both armies had fully arrived at Gettysburg. The Union Army of the Potomac under General George G. Meade, with 90 to 100,000 soldiers, dug into the hills to the south of town. The rebel Army of Northern Virginia under General Robert E. Lee, with 65 to 75,000 soldiers. General Lee had planned to crush both flanks of the Union Army in a decisive attack led by General Ewell on the northeast, and, where we will focus much of this video, an attack by General Longstreet to the west of the Union line. In early afternoon, Union General Warren rode up to Little Round Top. He realized it was undefended except for a few men of the Signal Corps. He could see in the woods below the glint of Confederate bayonets as they were preparing for attack. He hastily sent couriers for reinforcements. Colonel Strong Vincent intercepted the call for help. Recognizing the danger, he marched his brigade to the top of the hill without waiting for orders and deployed his troops along the hillside, minutes before the rebel attack. The regiments in his brigade were the 16th Michigan holding the right flank. To the center were the 44th New York and the 83rd Pennsylvania Regiment, and holding the left flank, under command of Colonel Joshua Chamberlain, were the 20th Maine. Facing them, the attackers were 4 battle-hardened regiments from Alabama and Texas, from General Longstreet's corps. Exhausted from a grueling 25-mile march in the summer heat and lacking water, they courageously charged up the boulder-strewn hillside with ferocity. The fighting dissolved into a brutal close-quarters melee amid smoke, rocks, and trees. Colonel Vincent was mortally wounded early on in the attack, while rallying his men to the right flank. On the left flank, Colonel Chamberlain's 20th Maine withstood assault after assault from the 15th Alabama Infantry. For over an hour, these soldiers bravely fought in the burning summer heat for that hillside. With ammo running low and his lines stretched out across the hill, Chamberlain realized they could not stand any more volleys of fire. He made a desperate decision, but one that would save the Union line from collapse and cement himself and the 20th Maine into history. He orders his men to fix bayonets and charge. The 20th Maine thundered across and down the hill in a swinging motion. The stunned Confederate soldiers, exhausted from hours of battle, broke. Many surrendered where they stood, the others retreated down the hill. Chamberlain had saved the day. While this action is relatively small in the grand scheme of the Battle of Gettysburg and the Civil War, it had monumentous consequences, and you can argue it's really one of the turning points of the war in favor of the Union. By winning that hill, the 20th Maine had stopped the Confederates from flanking the Union army, allowing the momentum of the battle to shift in the Union's favor. It led to the decisions, especially the next day, with the Confederate generals carrying out Pickett's charge. Shortly after, the Union would win the battle, while the Gettysburg campaign did go on, and there was a few smaller actions as the Army of Northern Virginia fled south. It really changed the whole dynamic of the war. The Confederate offensive strategy had ended. While they did win some major and quite famous battles, such as Cold Harbor, the majority of all the battles afterwards were defensive, and there was no major push from the Confederates. They never really, apart from on small little skirmishes, entered Union states in the north. And 2 years later, the Confederates would surrender at Appomattox Courthouse. This painting, like in the films, like in the memoirs from the soldiers that were there, really captures the spirit of what was happening. While it shows actions from both sides, it shows the Confederates marching up the hill to the side. On the bottom left, they're still coming up the hill with their battle standard. It shows the dead and wounded. This was hours into the battle. There would have been dead and wounded littered all across this hillside, men writhing round in pain. But then it shows the 20th Maine infantry charging down that hill, and it really shows the kind of the tidal wave of them coming down and the momentum of all these men, 200 to 300 men, charging down this hill to rout the Confederate forces. In the centre, with obviously Colonel Chamberlain leading it with his sabre raised. The details that I quite like in this painting are it kind of looks like he's more of a heavenly figure with the way the light is coming in from the trees onto him. But then it's how he looks immaculate. His uniform is very clean and tidy. And bear in mind, he would have just marched for days prior to this to get to the battlefield and fought a bloody vicious fight for this hill. But in the painting, it's he's looking very clean and tidy. And one of the main points is just behind Colonel Chamberlain is the standard bearer flying the United States flag as he's charging down the hill. The flag is fluttering with the charge. This is quite iconic. You see this in any nation's military art, paintings, photography of a national standard or a unit standard flying gloriously. That's another big part that always builds pictures and builds paintings, builds art to show the patriotic symbol of that nation is there and it's leading the way essentially. Mort Künstler is a very interesting artist and illustrator. While much of his work is quite modern, in going up into the 2000s. This painting was during the 90s at really a resurgence in Civil War interest in the pop culture, with the Ken Burns documentary being released, the multiple films all about the Civil War. It really spiked interest not just in America but internationally. That's how I first started learning about the Civil War, was through Ken Burns and seeing these little paintings when we first started getting internet. And I would be sat there googling battles when Wikipedia was in its infancy and trying to learn as much as I could. But also with Mort Künstler, his earlier art and illustrations are quite bizarre, you could say. He was an illustrator for a men's adventure magazine in the 50s, 60s. That's where his career really started. So when you go onto his website, you'll see some rather bizarre illustrations of men fighting bears and cougars out in the wilderness, or raunchy women on roller coasters in their bikinis with spies firing off pistols. But I'm quite happy and quite glad that he was able to then move into this military genre where he's painted some quite emotional and fantastic paintings, like the 20th Maine, showing the courage and the heroism and the realities of the battles. While he's got many more like this, there's others that I always enjoy as the human factor, showing soldiers just living their lives, carrying out normal tasks day to day, not fighting anything. And even that, it's the kind of cigarette card images you would get of soldiers just stood in their uniform, where he's done quite a few like that, covering not just Civil War, but Indian Wars, Revolutionary Wars, going up to World War One, Two. And yeah, please go check out the website. Sadly, Mort Künstler did pass away. I believe it was early last year in 2025 at the age of 93. But his website's still up. You could still purchase his art, and I would recommend going on and having a look. It's all very interesting, and if you're on my subreddit, you will see a lot of his art get posted quite often. He's one of kind of the favourites, you could say, and especially in the Civil War historical communities. Well, thank you very much for watching. This was just a history on the background of the charge at Little Round Top by the 20th Maine by Mort Künstler. Now, if I have got anything wrong in this video, please let me know. I want to make sure that I'm giving the most accurate history possible and talking about this. If you have any recommendations for future videos or stuff you want to see, please just let me know. And thank you very much for watching. Have a good day.